There are photographs that don't age. They remain frozen, immune to time, smiling long after the person inside them has changed, suffered, and disappeared. For years, Farrah Fawcett existed inside one of those photographs. Not as a woman, not as a voice, not as a mind, but as a surface. A grin pinned to paper. A posture endlessly replicated. A beauty flattened into decoration. The world believed it knew her because it had seen her everywhere. But seeing is not the same as understanding. And in Farrah's case, visibility became the very thing that erased her complexity. Long after the posters were torn down and the hairstyles fell out of fashion, her real story remained buried beneath nostalgia. It is only now, decades later, that the silence surrounding her struggles has begun to lift. What emerges is not a fairy tale of fame, but a quieter, heavier truth. A woman shaped by discipline, ambition, disappointment, resilience, and loss. A woman who kept choosing substance in a world that only rewarded surface. Farrah Fawcett did not vanish when the spotlight dimmed. She endured something far harder. She lived on, unseen. Before she became a symbol, Farrah Fawcett was a child in Corpus Christi, Texas, shaped by routine and restraint. Her household was modest, Catholic, and structured. Her father worked long days in oil fields. Her mother kept the home running with quiet authority. There was no indulgence, no fantasy of stardom. Creativity, when it appeared, came through discipline. Farrah sculpted with care, not flair. She studied anatomy before she studied beauty. Even as a child, she approached art with seriousness, not ego. Teachers noticed how carefully she worked, how she observed before acting. Beauty arrived early, but it didn't intoxicate her. It confused her. Attention came whether she wanted it or not. She learned quickly that admiration could be conditional and fleeting. That lesson would follow her into every room she entered. In high school, she was voted most beautiful year after year, a title that felt more like repetition than reward. She didn't chase the crown, it chased her, and instead of embracing it, she protected herself with distance. People expected lightness. She offered focus. People expected performance. She offered work. Even then, she understood something others would take decades to learn. Being seen was not the same as being valued. When Farrah arrived at the University of Texas at Austin, she did not imagine Hollywood waiting for her. She chose microbiology first, not out of rebellion but curiosity. The microscopic appealed to her because it demanded precision. It didn't flatter. It didn't reward beauty. It rewarded understanding. But art pulled her back. Sculpture offered a language that felt honest. Clay resisted. Stone argued back. You couldn't smile your way through it. A mentor noticed her instinct for form and texture, how she treated bodies not as objects but as structures shaped by tension and balance. Farrah thrived quietly. She lived simply, joined a sorority without losing herself to it, and became known as someone approachable, grounded, and generous with her time. When an agent noticed her photograph, the shift was abrupt. Possibility arrived without permission. Her parents hesitated. Farrah did too. But opportunity has a way of framing hesitation as fear. She left for Lowe's Angels with uncertainty packed alongside her clothes. Within weeks, she was signed. The speed was intoxicating to everyone but her. She didn't feel discovered. She felt redirected. And once momentum took over, it did not ask what she wanted to become. It decided for her. Hollywood did not meet Farrah Fawcett as a person. It met her as a surface ready to be molded. Commercials came first, then small television roles. She learned her lines quickly. She showed up prepared. But preparation was never what people commented on. They commented on light, hair, angles. She became fluent in the language of being framed. The more successful she became, the less control she felt. That paradox defined her early career. When the photograph that would change everything was taken, it was not designed to be iconic. It was intimate. No studio, no stylists, no machinery. She did her own makeup, chose her own swimsuit, arranged herself in her own space. There was no performance, just comfort. That authenticity became its power. The image spread faster than context ever could. Millions of copies sold. Entire rooms defined by her presence. But the woman inside the photograph remained absent from the conversation. Financially, she benefited, but the profit imbalance was staggering. Corporations earned fortunes. She earned far less than the image generated. Worse than the money was the narrowing of identity. She was no longer an actress trying to build range. She was an image that could be reproduced endlessly without her participation. When Charlie's Angels premiered, the response was immediate and overwhelming. The show didn't just succeed, it dominated. Farrah became the face of a phenomenon she did not control. Her hairstyle turned into a cultural instruction manual. Salons filled with requests. Magazines replicated angles. Yet behind the scenes, her experience was far less glamorous. Long days, limited input, pay that did not reflect her impact. Merchandise bearing her likeness flooded stores while she received a fraction of the revenue. When she asked questions, she was labeled difficult. When she asked for depth, she was dismissed. The character she played was designed to be admired, not understood. Farrah wanted more than admiration. She wanted participation. At home, the imbalance extended into her marriage. As her visibility grew, tension followed. Fame did not empower her. It isolated her. When she chose to leave the show after one season, it was not an impulsive act. It was a refusal. She understood that staying would cement her into something she could never undo. The legal retaliation that followed was swift and punishing. The message was unmistakable. Independence would be expensive. After the lawsuit settled, the industry shifted its posture. Opportunities did not vanish overnight. They thinned. Scripts arrived with conditions. Roles came with expectations she could not meet without surrendering herself. Her early film work carried the weight of impossible anticipation. She was judged not as an actor learning a new medium, but as an image expected to translate effortlessly. When films failed, blame traveled downward. Reviews became personal. Her performances were not evaluated, they were used as proof. Each setback reinforced a narrative she did not author. Behind the scenes, pressure mounted. Advisors urged compromise, silence, compliance. She resisted where she could and paid for it each time. Projects that challenged her image were framed as desperation. Projects that embraced it were framed as stagnation. There was no correct choice. The industry had already decided what she was allowed to be. The deeper truth was that Farrah was learning how easily admiration turns conditional when it is no longer profitable. 1980s became a crucible. Financial mistakes compounded professional uncertainty. Marital collapse mirrored career instability. Auditions felt transactional. Roles offered little protection or respect, yet something in her refused to retreat. When the burning bed arrived, it did not feel like redemption. It felt like risk. The story was heavy, unresolved, uncomfortable. Executives doubted her capacity to carry it. Farrah doubted herself too, but she committed fully. She studied fear. She embodied exhaustion. She stripped away everything that had once shielded her. When the film aired, the response stunned everyone. Viewers didn't see glamour, they saw endurance. For the first time, her face wasn't performing beauty, it was performing survival. The cultural impact extended beyond ratings. Conversations followed, resources were offered. Her work became functional, not decorative. That shift changed her relationship with acting. It no longer needed to validate her. It needed to tell the truth. From that point forward, Farrah chose roles that demanded emotional excavation. Extremities pushed her beyond comfort and safety. The violence of the material left marks that did not fade when the curtain closed. Therapy became necessary, not optional. She absorbed pain without guidance on how to release it. Small sacrifices followed, a role that terrified her. She approached it with academic rigor, refusing sensationalism. The response was intense and divided, but respect replaced dismissal. She had crossed into territory few expected and fewer supported. The cost was cumulative. Emotionally, she carried stories that did not belong to her long after filming ended. Personally, her relationship with Ryan O'Neal mirrored volatility she could not escape. Love coexisted with chaos. Their home absorbed arguments too loud for a child to hear. Farrah tried to hold everything together while privately unraveling. Strength became expectation. Vulnerability became invisible. The diagnosis arrived without ceremony. Anal cancer. Rare, aggressive, private. She shared it selectively, protecting herself from spectacle. Treatment was brutal. Radiation burned. Chemotherapy drained. Pain became routine. What devastated her most was betrayal. Medical privacy was violated. Her records accessed and sold. The body she had fought to reclaim became public property again. When remission briefly arrived, hope followed cautiously. It did not last. The cancer returned, spreading further. Farrah chose documentation not for sympathy but for honesty. She wanted the process seen without romance. Cameras stayed on when comfort disappeared. She sought experimental treatment abroad. Results were uncertain. Energy faded. Control mattered more than outcome. Shaving her head was an act of agency, participation over surrender. Identity reclaimed in small, deliberate choices. Farrah Fawcett died surrounded by constancy, not crowds. Her final word was not an image, it was a name. In death, the world reverted to simplicity. Posters, hair, nostalgia, but slowly, quietly, another legacy emerged. Her foundation funded care for those without access. Research continued where hope was limited. Awareness replaced silence. Artistic work once dismissed gained recognition. Her sculptures stood on their own. Younger generations rediscovered her not as a symbol, but as a person who resisted reduction. The questions came late. Why was she punished for wanting more? Why did control threaten an industry built on consumption? Farrah Fawcett was not forgotten. She was misunderstood. And now, finally, remembered whole. By the time the applause softened and the roles slowed, Farrah Fawcett had already learned a truth few celebrities ever admit aloud. Survival after fame requires more strength than survival during it. The world assumes the hardest part is becoming known. For Farrah, the hardest part was continuing once the noise thinned. She no longer moved through rooms as an event. She moved as a woman with a history people half remembered. Some saw nostalgia. Others saw risk. Very few saw the work still burning quietly inside her. Yet this was the period when she became most deliberate. Fame had stripped her once. She would not let it do so again. She began choosing solitude over spectacle, substance over reassurance. It was not a retreat. It was a recalibration, and it happened without announcement. Her relationship with Ryan O'Neal existed in a state of emotional weather, unpredictable, intense, impossible to ignore. Their connection carried tenderness and volatility in equal measure. Love arrived loudly. So did conflict. Farrah did not romanticize the chaos, but she endured it longer than she should have, believing loyalty could stabilize what passion could not. Their home became a place where affection and anger shared the same air. Their son witnessed moments no child should be asked to process. Farrah internalized the damage, believing she could absorb it without consequence. She was wrong. Emotional endurance has a cost, even when chosen willingly. When illness entered her life, it did not arrive as a dramatic interruption. It slipped in quietly, through tests and appointments, through language that sounded clinical but carried irreversible weight. Anal cancer was not a diagnosis the public expected, nor one they handled with grace. Farrah understood immediately how vulnerable the truth made her. She told only those she trusted, not because she felt shame, but because she valued control. For most of her life, her body had been discussed without her consent. She would not allow illness to become another public performance. Treatment dismantled any remaining illusion of invincibility. Radiation burned. Chemotherapy hollowed. Pain arrived without narrative structure. There were no heroic arcs, only endurance measured in hours. Farrah did not speak publicly about suffering, but she did not deny it privately either. She allowed herself moments of collapse without apology. Strength, she learned, did not require constant composure. It required honesty. That lesson would later shape one of her most consequential decisions. The violation of her medical privacy cut deeper than the diagnosis itself. Strangers accessed her records repeatedly, turning confidential information into currency. The betrayal confirmed something she had suspected for years. That fame had never expired, it had simply changed form. Her body was still considered public terrain. Legal action followed, but no ruling could restore what was taken. Trust, once broken, does not regenerate. She withdrew further, not out of bitterness, but self-preservation. When remission was briefly declared, Farrah did not celebrate publicly. She allowed herself hope in measured doses, aware of how fragile it was. She spoke about future work cautiously, as if optimism itself required supervision. When the cancer returned, this time spreading, there was no dramatic reckoning, only clarity. She understood the fight would be long, uncertain, and exhausting, and so she made a choice that startled even those closest to her. She would let the camera back in, not to glorify, but to document. The decision to film her illness was not rooted in legacy building. It was rooted in refusal. Refusal to let cancer be sanitized. Refusal to let pain remain abstract. Farrah wanted truth to replace metaphor. She wanted people to see what treatment actually demanded. When the camera lingered during moments of physical breakdown, she did not ask for mercy. She asked for accuracy. This was not bravery, it was authorship. She was reclaiming narrative authority over her own body for the first time. Germany offered experimental treatment and uncertain hope. Travel drained her strength but not her resolve. She endured procedures without guarantees, driven not by denial but possibility. Between hospital visits, she clung to ordinary moments, shared meals, laughter that arrived unexpectedly, long silences that did not require explanation. When her hair began to fall, she chose not to negotiate with grief. She shaved it herself. Control mattered more than appearance. Participation mattered more than resistance. As her physical strength declined, something else grew clearer. The work she had done, often dismissed, often misunderstood, was beginning to settle into its proper place. Her sculptures gained attention independent of her image. Critics reevaluated performances once minimized. Younger artists spoke of her influence not as style, but courage. She had insisted on complexity in an industry that punishes it. That insistence had not been in vain. Farrah Fawcett died without spectacle. No orchestrated farewell. No carefully managed image. She left quietly, surrounded by constancy rather than crowds. Her final word was personal, not symbolic. In death, the world returned briefly to its habits, replaying images, resurrecting nostalgia. But something had shifted. The simplicity no longer satisfied. Her foundation expanded steadily, without fanfare. It funded treatment access, supported families navigating impossible costs, and invested in research where few resources existed. This work reflected Farrah more accurately than any photograph ever had. It was practical. It was focused. It was human. The absence of spectacle was intentional. As more details surfaced, about industry retaliation, medical betrayal, emotional endurance, the narrative fractured. Questions replaced assumptions. Why was she punished for ambition? Why was autonomy treated as threat? Why did it take illness for empathy to emerge? These questions lingered without resolution, demanding reflection rather than closure. Farrah Fawcett's legacy now exists in layers. The image remains, but it no longer stands alone. It is contextualized by discipline, resistance, vulnerability, and consequence. She was not a cautionary tale. She was a case study in how systems respond to women who refuse to stay decorative. Time has